My childhood photo was edited to hide who I really was. I didn't know that for most of my life. I didn't even suspect it. To me, it was just an innocent picture. A toddler in a yellow dress, smiling softly at the camera, hands clutching a stuffed rabbit, sunlight warming the backyard fence behind me. It sat in a white frame on top of my mother's dresser for as long as I can remember. I used to stare at that photo, wondering why it felt like a ghost of someone I should know, someone I almost remembered. That photo haunted me, even before I knew why. My name is Ava, but that hasn't always been my name. Growing up, I was called Aaron. My parents raised me as their only son. My room was blue, filled with toy cars and action figures I never touched. I always felt like I was performing, like there was a role I was supposed to play that didn't quite fit. I would walk past mirrors and not recognize the reflection. I would hear my name called and feel an invisible layer of shame cover me like a blanket I couldn't shake off. When I was 6, I tried to tell my mom I didn't want to wear boy clothes to school anymore. She smiled tightly and said, "That's not funny, sweetheart." I never mentioned it again. But the feeling didn't go away, it grew. It followed me like a shadow, silent but ever-present. It was in high school that things began unraveling. I was quiet, shy, always the one hiding in the back of group photos. I'd pull my hoodie over my head, not because I wanted to be cool, but because I hated being seen. My classmates thought I was weird, awkward. I didn't date, didn't party, didn't do sports. I couldn't explain why. How do you explain a pain that has no name yet? A homesickness for a self you've never met? But the real shift came the day I opened an old family photo album in the attic. It was summer. I was helping my mom clean before a family reunion, dusting off boxes full of yearbooks and keepsakes. One of the albums fell open, and there, tucked between pages of school pictures and holiday cards, was a Polaroid I had never seen before. It took me a second to realize it was me. But this time the dress was pink. And the soft curls around my face weren't cropped short like they always had been in every other photo. My name wasn't written on the back. Just the date, April 12th, 2006. I stared at that photo for what felt like an hour. Something about it felt right. My skin tingled. My heart raced. My throat dried up like I had swallowed sand. Why had I never seen this picture before? I brought it downstairs and asked my mom about it. I'll never forget the way her smile dropped. She looked at the photo, then at me, then carefully took it from my hands and said, "That was a mistake. You were just playing dress up. That's all." But her voice shook, and her hands trembled as she tucked the picture into her apron and walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I waited until she went to bed, crept downstairs, and opened the album again. The photo was gone. That's when the questions started eating at me. Why was that photo hidden? Why was it different from all the others? And why, deep down, did I feel like that version of me, the one in the pink dress, with the soft eyes and relaxed smile, was more real than the one I saw in the mirror every day? I needed answers. So I started digging. Over the next few weeks, I began to search for clues in old home videos, journals, anything I could find. And that's when the cracks in the story of my childhood began to widen. I found an old video tape labeled A's Third Birthday. I popped it into our dusty VHS player. At first, it seemed like any other family video: balloons, cake, my father filming awkwardly, narrating off camera. But then the camera focused on a small child in a lavender tutu, spinning slowly, laughing, clapping with delight. That was me. And my father said, "Look at our little angel. Ava, say hi to the camera, Ava." My heart stopped. I rewound it, played it again. The same words, the same name, Ava. I must have sat there, numb, for hours. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I just felt like a veil had been pulled back, and I was finally seeing the truth. Not a fantasy, not a guess proof. That I wasn't imagining this feeling all these years. That at one point, for a brief, precious moment, someone saw me for who I really was. But the next morning, the tape was gone. My mom had taken it. She didn't talk to me for 3 days. When she finally did, she sat me down at the kitchen table and said words I'll never forget. "You were born different," she whispered. "And your father didn't understand. He didn't want a daughter. So we tried to change things. We cut your hair. We changed your name. We told you it was all a phase. I stared at her, stunned. You edited my life, I said. You erased me. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't deny it. It was for your protection, she said. We thought the world would be cruel. We thought it would be easier if you just fit in. I couldn't breathe. Everything I knew about myself, my memories, my childhood, it was all tainted, manipulated, rewritten. I locked myself in my room that night. I looked in the mirror and didn't see Aaron anymore. I didn't even see a confused teenager. I saw someone who had been buried. Someone who had survived being erased. That was the first night I said the name out loud. Ava. And it felt like coming home. But nothing about the days that followed were easy. When I told my mom I wanted to start living as myself, she didn't yell. She just looked tired. Sad. Like she was watching a dream fall apart. My dad didn't say anything at all. He just started spending more time at work. Sometimes he wouldn't come home for days. At school, things got worse before they got better. I changed my name in the school system, started wearing clothes that felt right to me. The rumors started fast. Some teachers refused to call me by the right name. A group of boys graffitied "freak" on my locker. I stopped going to lunch. I spent most of my breaks crying in the bathroom. But I kept going. Because for the first time, even in pain, I felt real. Then one day, I came home to find a box on my bed. Inside were all the photos my mom had hidden. The originals. Me in dresses. Me smiling. Me being myself. There was a note taped to the inside of the lid. It said, "I'm sorry. I should have let you be Ava all along." It wasn't everything. It didn't fix the years I had lost. But it was something. And I clung to it like a lifeline. The last time I saw my father, he stood at the bottom of the stairs while I walked out wearing a summer dress and makeup. He looked at me like I was a stranger. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something but didn't. He left that night. Moved across the country. We haven't spoken since. Some wounds never close. But this story, my story, isn't just about pain. It's about reclaiming what was taken. About finding the pieces of yourself hidden in old boxes and silent memories and daring to say, "This is me. This is who I was meant to be." My childhood photo was edited, but I'm not anymore. I am Ava. And I'm finally living the truth they tried to hide. I thought once I found the truth, the hard part would be over. That reclaiming my name, my identity, would make everything fall into place. I was wrong. Coming out didn't end the struggle, it only shifted it. The world didn't suddenly understand me just because I understood myself. In many ways, it got harder. Because now I wasn't invisible anymore. Now I was a target. People stared, whispered. Some crossed the street when they saw me. At school, even those who used to ignore me now had something to say. "You used to be normal. Are you doing this for attention? Is this some kind of phase?" I learned to walk through hallways like they were war zones, chin high, heart racing, always braced for the next cruel comment. But nothing hurt as much as silence from the people I once loved. My cousins stopped inviting me to birthdays. My grandmother, who used to knit me sweaters every winter, sent a card one day that said, "I don't know who you are anymore. Please don't confuse your cousins." It broke me, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Not after everything. Because the deeper I stepped into my truth, the more I realized how much had been stolen from me. Not just memories, not just dresses and names, but moments. Moments I could have felt seen. Moments I could have felt loved for who I actually was. There was one night that still replays in my mind. It was late. I was alone in my room, scrolling through old photos again. I paused on one me, maybe 4 years old, sitting on the grass, a rainbow bracelet around my wrist. I stared at that little face, and for the first time, I cried for her. Not because she was gone, but because no one protected her. I whispered to the screen, "I see you now. I swear I'll never hide you again." And something in me shifted. That was the night I decided to go further. To really take my life into my own hands. I started hormone therapy soon after. The clinic wasn't far, but the journey there felt like walking through fire. The waiting room was quiet, the air heavy. The first time I sat across from the doctor, I expected judgment. But she just smiled, looked me in the eye, and said, "You're here. That's what matters." And just like that, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The changes came slowly. Softer skin. A voice that pitched in strange, in-between ways. Some days I looked in the mirror and saw someone closer to myself. Other days, I only saw the distance I still had to travel. It was a strange kind of grief, the grief of mourning a life I never got to live. I didn't just want to be Ava in the present. I wanted to go back and let her grow. Let her exist. Let her be hugged and told she was beautiful without asterisks. But time doesn't bend that way. One of the hardest parts was learning to let go of the idea of justice. No one could give those years back to me. No apology would erase what had been done. My mother tried. In her own quiet way, she showed up to therapy with me once. She sat stiffly, eyes red but dry. She didn't say much. But after the session, as we walked to the car, she looked at me and whispered, "I should have fought for you harder." It was the closest thing to forgiveness we ever exchanged. Then, something unexpected happened. I got a message from a girl named Layla. A girl from my childhood I barely remembered. She sent a photo, one I'd never seen before. Me and her, sitting side by side at a birthday party. And I was wearing a tiara. She wrote, "I always remembered you like this. I'm so glad you're back." I cried for hours after reading that, because it meant that maybe not everyone forgot who I was. Some people remembered. Some part of me survived in the minds of others. Unedited. I began to share more of my story online, not to go viral, not for validation, but because I knew there were others like me. Others with photos edited, names changed, truths buried. And I wanted them to know, you're not alone. Your story matters. Even the parts they tried to erase. One day, I got a letter. Handwritten. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity got the better of me. It was from my father. A single page. He wrote, "I don't know how to talk to you. I don't know what to say. But I found a picture of you the other day when I hid. The one in the pink tutu. I couldn't stop looking at it. Not because I didn't recognize you, but because I did." There was no return address. No number. Just that. I don't know if we'll ever speak again. I don't know if he'll ever meet me as Ava. But for now, I have the photo back. And I've placed it on my desk, right beside a current picture of me. Two versions of myself, side by side. One that was hidden, and one that refuses to be. I've learned that the truth doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it brings more pain, more questions, more silence. But it also brings clarity. And freedom. The girl in that photo always existed. They just covered her up. But I uncovered her. I remembered her. And I became her. I am Ava. And no one gets to edit that anymore. I thought things might settle after that. That once I reclaimed my identity, told my truth, and reassembled the pieces of my life, the story would slow down. But life doesn't work that way. Healing is not a finish line. Sometimes, it's just the next step into another storm. Months passed. I started college in a nearby city just far enough away to breathe. No one there knew Erin. No one flinched when I introduced myself as Ava. I was just another girl, wandering through crowded lecture halls, scribbling notes in cafes, figuring out who I was in real time. I thought I had finally found a place to belong. Until I met Daniel. He sat next to me in a psychology class, always chewing gum, always scribbling jokes in the margins of his textbook. He was loud in a way that was charming, not obnoxious. The kind of person who made you feel like the room bent toward him just a little. He noticed me before I noticed him. "Hey, you're always highlighting things like your life depends on it. Ever thought of just reading?" I laughed, startled by how easily he disarmed me. And from that moment, we were inseparable. Study partners turned coffee buddies turned late-night confession sharers. He didn't know my past. Not at first. To him, I was just Ava. Smart, introverted, sarcastic when I trusted you. And, for the first time, I let myself feel wanted. He'd compliment me in these low, offhand ways. I like how your eyes crinkle when you're pretending not to laugh. You do this thing with your lip when you're thinking it's cute. You always smell like vanilla or maybe safety. I felt like I was living in someone else's dream, but that dream had limits. Every compliment sent me spinning, not out of joy, but fear. Because with every layer Daniel peeled back, I wonder what happens if he sees the parts one didn't choose. The parts one didn't get to shape? The ones that were forced on me, hidden, rewritten? One night, we were walking home after a party. It was drizzling, and he gave me his hoodie without asking. We were laughing, closer than ever before. He stopped in front of my apartment, looked at me like he was about to say something that would split the earth in two. I like you, Ava. My heart dropped. I've never met anyone like you. You're just real. I wanted to kiss him. God, I did. But instead, I stepped back and said, "There's something you don't know." I told him everything. Not like a confession, but like a release. My voice trembled, but I didn't cry. I told him about the edited photo, the name change, my father's absence, my mother's guilt, the fear, the pain, the years of pretending. And when I was done, there was only silence. Daniel didn't yell. He didn't walk away. He just stood there, staring. And then he said something that made my stomach twist. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because what could I say? That every time I felt seen, I also felt like a fraud? That love scared me, because it might not survive the truth? He didn't call the next day. Or the next. By the end of the week, I stopped waiting. I told myself it was okay. That maybe we were meant to be. That I'd rather be alone and real than loved under a lie. But grief doesn't listen to logic. I mourned him like a death I hadn't prepared for. I'd walk past places we visited and feel a phantom beside me. I'd reread our texts just to feel something warm again. Then one night, 2 months later, I got a message. It just said, "Can we talk?" We met at the same cafe where we'd first sat together for hours, pretending to study. Daniel looked tired, different, like the silence had haunted him, too. "I freaked out," he said, quietly. "Not because of you. Because of me. Because I realized I'd never thought about what it means to really see someone. And that scared me." He looked me in the eyes then. "But I missed you. And I know who you are, Ava. And I care about that person. Not the one in a photo. Not the name someone else chose. You." We didn't start dating right away. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. But something began again, not a romance, exactly, but a deeper connection. Real friendship. Maybe more. But this time, built on truth. Around the same time, something else shifted. I got a letter from the university's publication. They wanted to feature my story in a series about identity. I hesitated. I wasn't sure I was ready to be seen like that. Not anonymously. Not hidden. But I said yes. The piece went viral on campus. Some students stopped me in hallways to thank me. Others looked away. Some professors pulled me aside to say I was brave. One girl handed me a note that simply said, "You gave me permission to exist." That was the first time I realized, maybe all the pain, all the hiding, all the years spent chasing fragments of myself, they weren't in vain. Because every time I spoke my truth, I wasn't just reclaiming my life. I was lighting the path for someone else to do the same. But even as things improved, friends, acceptance, visibility, there was still one part of my story left unfinished. My father. I hadn't heard from him since that single-page letter. Until the day I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and a voice I hadn't heard in years said, "Ava?" My chest caved in. He said he was in town. That he'd been following my writing online. That he'd changed. I didn't believe him. Not really. But I agreed to meet him. We sat in a park, the same one where he once took childhood photos of me. He looked older. Smaller. He said he was sorry. That he was scared back then. That he thought he was protecting me. "But you weren't," I said. "You erased me." He nodded. Looked down at his hands. "I know. And I live with that every day." There was no hug. No cinematic reconciliation. But there was truth. And sometimes that's enough. As the sun dipped behind the trees, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the original photo, unedited. The one in the pink dress. The one he had hidden. He handed it to me with trembling fingers. "I kept it," he said. "I just couldn't look at it for a long time. But I never threw it away." I held it in my hands like it was sacred. Because it was. Proof. Proof that I was always here. Always Ava. Even when the world tried to tell me otherwise. And in that moment I knew this story wasn't about the photo. It was about what they tried to bury. And what refused to stay buried. Me. The photo now sits on my desk, no longer hidden in a drawer or buried beneath guilt. Framed not because I need to prove anything to anyone, but because I need the reminder. A reminder that the person I've become didn't emerge out of nowhere. She was always there. Waiting. Surviving. Even when no one else believed she could. I wish I could tell you everything was perfect after that moment in the park. That my dad and I built a beautiful new relationship. That he came to every Pride event and introduced me as his daughter with pride in his voice. But that's not what happened. He called a few more times, sometimes just to ask how I was doing. We shared photos back and forth. He sent pictures of the lake house he retired to, and I sent pictures of myself at school, with friends, once even with Daniel. He never said anything cruel. He never said anything too kind either. Our conversations lived in the in-between. Not estranged, not close. Just two people trying to speak across the weight of a fractured past. Some wounds, I learned, don't fully close. They just stop bleeding. In the years that followed, I finished school. Majored in sociology, with a minor in gender studies. It felt poetic, like I was studying the same systems that tried to erase me. I poured myself into it not for grades, but for something deeper, a mission. I started volunteering with a local LGBTQ+ youth center and eventually joined their board. I met kids 15, 16 years old who were just beginning to ask the questions I once didn't have language for. Kids who were terrified their families would turn on them. Kids who clung to their identities like they were made of glass. And I remembered being that kid. One girl, Mia, reminded me so much of myself it was almost painful. She barely spoke above a whisper, avoided mirrors, and didn't like being touched. But one day, after a long group session, she pulled me aside and asked, "Do you think I'll ever feel like myself? Not just pretending." I held her hand and said the only thing I could. "You already are yourself. You're just uncovering her." That moment changed me, because it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us, every person who had their photo edited, their name changed, their story rewritten. I wasn't just surviving. I was guiding others back to themselves. And that gave my past a kind of meaning I never thought possible. Daniel stayed in my life too. Our relationship didn't become a fairy tale. It wasn't easy. We broke things off, got back together, broke things off again. He had his own journey, his own biases, his own unlearning to do. But he never made me feel less than. He never tried to erase me. And that in itself was a kind of love I hadn't known before. Eventually, we settled into something quiet. A relationship built not on passion or fireworks, but understanding. And that understanding was stronger than anything else. Years later, I published a memoir. I didn't expect it to go anywhere. I thought maybe a few readers would find it on shelves and see themselves in the pages. But it struck something. A nerve. It was raw, unfiltered, filled with truth that made people uncomfortable. It was called Unedited, the girl they tried to erase. And it went viral. Interviews followed. Panels. Speaking events. And one day, I was asked to speak at a national educators conference about gender inclusivity and the importance of letting children be without shame, without fear. I stood on stage in front of hundreds of people, teachers, counselors, parents. And I told them the story of a girl in a pink dress, of a photo that was changed, of a life spent clawing its way back to the surface. I said, if someone had protected me instead of hiding me, I wouldn't have spent years trying to feel worthy of being seen. Don't let the next Ava grow up feeling like a mistake. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Afterward, a teacher came up to me and said, I had a student once. A little boy who always wore his sister's clothes when no one was watching. I told him to stop. I thought I was doing the right thing. But now, she looked down. I think I failed him. I told her the truth. You still have time to do better. Maybe not with him, but with the next child. Every speech, every message, every tear-filled conversation in the hallway afterward reminded me, our stories are more than memories. They are blueprints, maps for others trying to find their way home. A few months ago, my mother visited my apartment for the first time in years. We sat in the living room, sipping tea. She looked older, softer. She noticed the photo of me on the desk, the same one she once hid, now proudly displayed.
She didn't cry. She didn't comment.
She just smiled and said, "You were always beautiful." It was the first time she said that word beautiful without hesitation. And I believed her. Later that night, she left me an envelope on the table. Inside was a letter I had written as a child. Crayoned words, sloppy handwriting. It said, "My name is Ava. Don't tell Daddy. I just want to be her for a while." I wept holding that paper. Because I remembered writing it. I remembered hiding it. I never thought anyone had found it. But she had. And now, all these years later, she was returning it not with shame, but with honor. I framed it. It sits beside the photo now. 2 pieces of a girl they tried to hide. 2 testaments to the truth. I was always here. Even when they couldn't see me. Even when they refused to. Even when the world told me to stop. I never disappeared. I only waited. Waited for the moment I could take back the story. And write it myself. This is that story. Unedited. A few more years passed. Life had become quiet in the best way. I was still working at the youth center, still writing, still speaking when asked. I had built a version of adulthood I could live with, simple, honest, unglamorous, but fulfilling. I had friends who saw me, a small but growing community of queer creatives and activists who reminded me that family isn't always the one you're born into. And then something unexpected happened. It was a rainy Wednesday afternoon, and I was hosting a writing workshop for high school students. Most of them were shy, reluctant to share. But one kid, dark hair, oversized hoodie, eyes like a storm cloud, stood out. They kept their head down, scribbled furiously in a leather notebook, and never spoke unless asked. At the end of the session, I was gathering my things when I saw the same kid standing alone by the door. I walked over and asked, "Hey, did you want to talk?" They didn't meet my eyes, just handed me a folded piece of paper. I waited until they left before I opened it. It was a letter. Short. Written in careful, deliberate pen. "You probably don't remember me. My name's Jamie. My mom is your cousin Elena. She used to talk about you before everything happened, about how you were the one who wore dresses when no one was looking. She never said it like it was a bad thing, just like it was a secret. I think I'm like you." My throat closed. I hadn't seen Elena in over a decade. She was one of the relatives who'd gone silent when I came out. We were close as kids used to climb trees together, play hide-and-seek during family barbecues. I remember her laughter. I remember thinking she might have understood if she'd stayed. I sat in that empty classroom for a long time. Jamie came back the next week. And the next. They didn't speak much at first. But they listened. Wrote. Watched me with cautious hope, like they were studying someone who had survived the same storm they were still walking through. Eventually, we began to talk. They asked me questions no one had ever asked so directly. When did you know? Did it hurt to lose people? Did you ever wish you'd stayed hidden? I answered each one honestly. Carefully. And when I told them, "No, I don't wish I stayed hidden. I wish I had come out sooner," they started to cry. Not big, loud sobs. Just soft, barely their tears they tried to wipe away quickly. I didn't hug them. I didn't say it would be okay. I just stayed and let them cry. Weeks turned into months. Jamie opened up more. Told me they had come out to their mom, my cousin, and it hadn't gone well. She said I was confused, Jamie said. That she remembered what happened to you, and she didn't want that for me. That hurt more than I expected. I thought maybe, after all this time, Elena would have learned something. Would have seen the truth in who I became. But I understood her fear. I understood what it meant to be raised in silence and shame. I didn't excuse her, but I understood. So I asked Jamie if they wanted to meet someone. Someone who had been through it. Someone who might still love Elena, even after everything. They nodded. The next week, we met in the same park where I'd last seen my father. Jamie sat beside me on a bench, both of us quiet, watching the trees sway in the wind. I handed them the same photo, the one of me in the pink dress, the original. And I said, "This is the first time I was really me." They tried to cover it up, but it survived. Jamie held it delicately, like it might tear. "You're lucky," they said quietly, "to have found yourself." I smiled.
No.
I was just lucky enough to survive long enough to find myself. The rest I had to fight for. Jamie nodded. They didn't say anything else. But when they stood to leave, they hugged me.
Tight.
Without hesitation. And whispered, "Thank you for being alive." I watched them walk away, the photo still in their hands. That night, I got a message from Elena. Just one line. "I think I messed up. Can we talk?" And just like that, the past opened a small crack. I don't know what will come of it. I don't know if we'll ever be close again. But I know this. The story isn't just mine anymore. It never was. It belongs to everyone who's ever been told they had to change. Everyone who's been erased, then found themselves again. Everyone's still searching. The photo that was once hidden now lives in classrooms, community centers, conferences. It's been reprinted, reframed, reimagined. Not because it's a symbol of pain, but because it's proof. That truth doesn't stay buried forever. That the self we hide will always rise again. That we are never alone. And as long as I live, I will keep telling this story. Not for closure, but so that the next time someone asks, "Was I ever meant to be seen?" the answer will already be waiting.
Yes.
You were. You are. You always will be. I stayed up that night, pacing the room of the motel like a ghost. The silence felt louder than anything I'd ever heard before, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo me, in that pink dress, joy radiating from my eyes before someone decided it wasn't okay. Before someone, probably my mother, edited the truth out of me. In the morning, I stood outside Rachel's house for over 10 minutes, unsure if I even deserved to knock. I had come to understand she knew, maybe always had. When the door finally opened, she didn't look surprised to see me. Her eyes just softened. "You look tired," she said gently. "Come inside." I stepped into the house like I was crossing into another world, one where the truth had weight, but also where it could finally be held without shame. She led me to the kitchen and poured me coffee like it was any other day, as if my entire world hadn't just split open. I stared at the mug, not saying anything for a long time. "You found the photos, didn't you?" she finally asked, her voice low. I nodded, throat tight. I thought I had lost my mind. That maybe I imagined that version of myself. But it was real. I whispered. "You knew, didn't you?" Rachel looked down, her hand trembling slightly as she lifted the mug to her lips. "I did. I knew before anyone said anything out loud." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she sighed, placing her mug on the counter. "Because I thought it had to come from you. And because your mother made it very clear that she didn't want anyone encouraging you." I flinched at that. "So, she really did change them? The photos?" Rachel nodded. "She didn't just edit them. She burned some. Hid the rest. There were tantrums, threats. She said she was protecting you. That if anyone saw you like that, they'd hurt you. That it was better for you to forget." Tears burned my eyes. But I never forgot. I just started to hate myself instead. She came closer, her hand resting on mine. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I wanted to protect you, but I also didn't want to overstep. I thought maybe if I loved you quietly, that would be enough." "It wasn't," I whispered. "But I understand why you tried." And just like that, the silence between us cracked. Rachel pulled out more than just the copies of those few photos. She showed me old journals she had secretly kept, notes about the things I loved, words I had said, little things she observed when I was young. She remembered it all. You used to twirl in that pink dress for hours, she said. You would call yourself Rosie. And every time you looked in the mirror, you smiled like the world finally made sense. I laughed through the tears. Rosie, I repeated, the name sounding strange but warm on my tongue. That night, she brought out an old dress, dusty, faded, but familiar. My hands shook as I took it. It wasn't about fitting into it anymore. It was about honoring the child who once wore it freely. When I stepped into her living room wearing it, Rachel didn't gasp or cry. She just smiled. There you are, she whispered. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was performing. I felt like I was remembering, like the child in that photo had survived. I stayed with her for a few weeks. We talked about everything. I confronted the years I lost, the boy I pretended to be, the girl I buried,
The shame.
the fear, the aching desire to be loved not in spite of who I was, but because of it. But nothing could stay safe forever. One afternoon, I got a text from my mother. Just a photo of me in Rachel's living room, in the dress. No message, no words, just silence, louder than ever. I looked at Rachel. She saw my face go pale. It started, hasn't it? I nodded. Someone saw me. Someone sent it to her. Rachel stepped closer. You don't have to go back. But I knew I would. I had to. Not to beg for love. Not even for forgiveness. But to speak the truth. To end the silence. To finally say, I was edited once, but I won't be erased again. The train ride home felt like returning to the scene of a crime. My heart raced with every mile. I imagined her face, her voice. I didn't know if I'd be welcomed or cast out forever. But this time I was ready either way. When I walked through the front door, my father was waiting. Quiet. Watching. She's in the kitchen, he said, not meeting my eyes. I walked in, and she was there, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You look ridiculous, she said. Are you doing this to punish me? I shook my head.
No.
I'm doing this because I finally remembered who I am, and I deserve to exist. Her lips tightened. You're confused. I was, I replied, because you made sure I would be. Silence. Then she stepped forward and placed the photo she'd texted me on the table. I didn't send that to hurt you. I wanted you to see what you've become. I looked at it, then at her.
No.
You wanted me to feel shame again. But I don't. Not anymore. Her face cracked then. For a moment, I saw something pain, confusion, maybe even guilt, but it was gone as fast as it came. If you live like this, she whispered, you'll lose everything. I nodded. Maybe. But I've already lost too much pretending to be someone I'm not. I left that night. I haven't heard from her since. Sometimes, I wonder if she'll ever accept me. Sometimes I think about the years I'll never get back. The birthday parties, the family vacations, the childhood memories I can't fully trust. But other times I sit by the mirror, brush my hair, and say the name I reclaimed, Rosie. And in those moments, I feel whole, even if the world still edits people like me out of the frame. Because now, I won't let them. ChatGPT said. My hands trembled as I stared at the old, creased photo once again, the one where I stood between my cousins, smiling in the summer sun, my short hair neatly combed, wearing that stiff button-down shirt. The image that had sparked everything. I used to think that picture held some kind of warmth. Family. Innocence. But now, every time I looked at it, I didn't see myself, I saw the lie. I had found the original photo by accident. A backup CD of old family memories. I loaded it onto my laptop, curious, nostalgic. I wasn't prepared for what I found. There I was in the same photo, but I was wearing a sundress. My hair longer. My smile softer. And I wasn't standing between my cousins, I was holding my aunt's hand. Everything was different. I blinked hard, staring between the two versions. I double-checked the timestamps. Same date. Same day. Someone had altered the version I grew up seeing. Someone had erased her me. I don't remember ever wearing that dress. But the expression on my face, that joy, that peace, I knew it wasn't fake. Somewhere deep inside, I remembered what it felt like to be her, even if no one ever told me she existed. I printed both versions and brought them to my mother. I didn't say anything at first. I just placed them on the kitchen table, sat down, and waited. She froze when she saw them. Her fingers clenched around the edges of the edited version. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "It was on a backup CD," I said. "Why did you change it?" She didn't answer right away. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. I could see her fighting tears and shame. "You were 3, she finally said. "You insisted on wearing that dress that day. You cried when I tried to put you in the shirt and pants. Your aunt said it was fine, said to let you be. I gave in. Just for the picnic. But afterward, your father was furious when he saw the photos.